Well, good morning. Welcome to our webinar, Choosing the Right Proptech Partner, Strategic Considerations for Multifamily Operators. Improving the resident experience, streamlining operations, and staying ahead of regulations are just some of the reasons the multifamily industry has seen rapid adoption of Proptech solutions in recent years. The increasingly competitive marketplace has driven tech innovation to the forefront, but with so many options available, it can be overwhelming to determine which solution will truly meet unique demands of your business, offer a return on your investment, and meet compliance requirements. In this webinar, we'll discuss the importance of evaluating solutions against your strategic plan, key factors to consider when balancing innovation with compliance and security, and the benefits of choosing true partners, not just vendors. And by the end, we will be equipped with the knowledge you need to make strategic and innovative decisions about existing and future Proptech solutions. You'll also have a better understanding of what to expect from a successful technology partnership and how to maximize your investment. I'm Jason Whittington, the Chief Technology Officer at Real Estate Business Analytics. Before REBA, I spent over 10 years with the G.B. Glick Company in Indianapolis as the Vice President of Business Solutions, the VP of BS for short. And I was a property management software consultant before that, focusing on software selection and implementation, custom report writing, and business process review. I'm a graduate at Hillsdale College with a degree in accounting. Samantha Chalmers is the Innovation and Integrations Director for Mill Creek Residential. Prior to joining Mill Creek, she worked as Director of Regional Marketing for Tricon Residential and as an Account Director for Linnell Taylor Marketing. She brings extensive experience from all verticals under the marketing umbrella to her position. In her role, she works with key stakeholders to create alignment on the goals the tech stack should meet, determines how to measure performance, gathers feedback from the on-site teams, and works with vendor partners to refine and enhance the technology. Samantha is a passionate believer that emotional intelligence is just as important as robust technical skill set, and that kindness and empathy only strengthen leadership. Amen to that. She's a graduate of the University of Kansas and lives in Los Angeles, California, with her husband and two pups, Rock, Chalk, Jayhawk. I had to squeeze that one out there, Samantha. As a Hoosier fan, that's tough for me. Jason Shaw is the founder of Realms, a consulting firm focused on system implementations and optimization for the real estate industry. Prior to founding Realms, Jason spent more than 16 years in global technology leadership roles for Catalyst Housing Group, Greystar Real Estate Partners, and J Street Companies after starting his career as a property accountant for Riverstone Residential Group. Jason is currently completing a master's in accounting at the University of Texas at Dallas, the school from which he received a bachelor's in finance many years ago. He also holds an MBA from Texas A&M University in Commerce, Texas. Well, welcome, Jason and Samantha, and thanks for being here. Really appreciate you guys being willing to share your insights with us. So to begin, let's discuss evaluating Proptech solutions against your strategic plan. Jason, let's start with you. Do you think a strategic plan is mission critical to setting up your org for any future tech integrations?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a prerequisite before you really start to have conversations with the variety of Proptech vendors and partners that are out there. If you kind of go into those conversations without really an ironclad strategic plan, what can happen is that you'll hear a lot of things that are kind of being provided by these partners, these technology experts in the space that sound really awesome, that you'll want to be a part of your strategic plan, kind of as an effect of those conversations. So at the very least, having I'll say a rigid yet somewhat open kind of plan going in. Rigid being, here are the core tenets of our business, here are the things that are important to us as we pursue these, but open and flexible because a lot of these are nascent technologies that don't exist yet, and that's why these partners are in business.
Great. Samantha, what's your perspective on the necessity of having a strategic plan to drive tech assessments?
Yeah, I mean, the plan is really, it's the foundation, right? And so when you go out, before you even schedule demos, you have the conversations internally and you decide, what are we trying to achieve? There is a business goal here, right? That we're working towards. And so what is that goal? How are we expecting to measure that goal? And I think once you have that in place and you have that alignment, again, even maybe before the demos, I like to conduct a stakeholder analysis and reach out not only to all of the different support groups within the organization that would be impacted by a new technology, but I also reach out to on-site associates and make sure that I get a good understanding of what the process looks like today. That all fuels how you will evaluate these solutions, and it fuels the plan. I mean, this is all part of that plan, understanding what you're trying to achieve, how does it look today, and how are you trying to change it?
Yeah, that's a great framework, Samantha. How do you measure success when implementing Proptech, whether that's related to metrics or impact to your teams? How do you look at that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can measure technology in different ways. There's always going to be the quantitative portion of it, right? Because you started with a business goal, there will be a KPI attached to that goal. And so you can drill down and think about what metrics populate that KPI. And so when you're measuring the success of any technology, you think about those metrics, but you can also think about long-term impact. There's a lot of qualitative things that go into success of technology. And so I think encouraging all stakeholders to have that conversation as you go into evaluations, I think that's important as well.
Are there any non-negotiables for you as you look at solutions?
Yes, a bidirectional integration with our PMS is first and foremost. And that is because one of our core values is we really protect our on-site teams. Like internally, we don't want our teams to test a technology that's going to require multiple workarounds or to change their process, significantly. And so we want to protect their time and their morale and their headspace because they're doing a bunch of different things. So bidirectional integration, first and foremost. And then secondly is reporting, because we talked about testing technology and we already have KPIs that we're trying to achieve. So if you can't give me those two things, you're not going to be on my short list.
No seat at the table.
No.
So Jason, you work with clients on implementing technology. I'm sure you get involved in some of the assessments as well. So when you're consulting with your clients, how much do you recommend using a templated approach or a standardized process versus a more open approach to evaluating solutions?
I think you can definitely go too far either direction, right? You could go to the extreme and have a very rigid kind of RFI, RFP process where you have hundreds of questions that you ask all potential partners of all potential types of services, go through these very exhaustive processes, some of which you'll actually encourage vendors to self-select out. So I think you can definitely get too rigorous on the selection process. I think having a consistent approach for your organization, so one that works for how your organization is really going to make the decision, and as Samantha said, kind of measure success of the implementation after the fact. You got to kind of come into it knowing what your success criteria are. So having a consistent approach is key. You need to be mindful about the fact that what you're looking at may not be apples and apples, right? You may be looking at Granny Smith's and Red Delicious, for example. So there may be slight nuances that, because all of these PropTech partners either kind of all fit into a similar box or they are intentionally differentiated, you have to be flexible. So I think that's really important.
Okay, very good. So now that we've established a baseline approach to evaluating solution, let's talk about balancing innovation with compliance and security. We're going to start with you, Samantha. You've got innovation in your title as the Innovation and Integrations Director. Mill Creek created a role specifically for you to drive innovation for the organization. So can you explain to our audience why it's so important to you and to Mill Creek to innovate?
Yeah. When you think about the importance of innovation, I always go back to who we're serving as an industry and as an organization. Our renters, actually, let's take a step back further. We're offering housing, right? And housing is a core necessity for all organisms to survive, right? So when we think about who our customer is and what they need, those needs are always evolving. And so as an organization and even as an industry, we see the need just in how we live our lives to evolve and to change. And that means to innovate. When we think about what's happening right now, today, there's a renters bill of rights that was proposed and proposed legislation on junk fees, and that will impact our industry and the way we meet those criterias and the way we make housing more the way we meet that criteria is really to innovate and to look for new solutions and to think creatively. So that's what we're thinking about.
So for you personally and for Mill Creek, how do you know if you're really innovating versus just implementing?
It's a hard balance because I think in my job, it's at least specifically in my role, it is heavily leaning towards implementation. I think to be someone that oversees or manages innovation, you have to be able to put a hand in multiple different buckets, and that means that you have to be good at implementation. But for me personally, when I think about innovation, I always think about the questions we're asking ourselves as an organization. And if we don't know the answer to the question, then that's when we know we're being innovative. If I'm asking myself questions that I already know the answer to, then I'm not being innovative enough, And so we should also be saying, we don't know yet. We still have to test. And that's how, at least I know, okay, we're pushing forward. We're a little bit uncomfortable, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it's maybe a little bit more art than science when it comes to innovation sometimes.
You have to be willing to blend the two, and that's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. Jason, from your perspective, what does balancing innovation with compliance and security mean?
I love this question because I feel like there's been an evolution over the past probably 10 to 15 years of how we think about compliance as it relates to innovation. I feel like initially, when we started to see a lot of regulation around data privacy, et cetera, you would kind of see this dynamic where I, as the implementer, was the person in between kind of the business solution and the actual kind of implementation of the business solution, because the ground rules had changed, right? So that was kind of where we started. I think where we're kind of at now in this evolution is that compliance, well, one, we hear about it, months in advance, maybe years in advance, and we've already started to see things that kind of echo from, GDPR to CCPA and more kind of local regulations that effectively have kind of commonalities associated with them that, if anything, should make the rules for kind of providing innovative solutions more straightforward and more forecastable, right? More foreseeable. So what I think the benefit of that is that the ability to be compliant can be a differentiator kind of at the early stages with Proptech partners. I can remember a conversation that I had in 2017, which was right between kind of when GDPR was proposed and when it was implemented. I was having a conversation with, I won't name the company, but it was a payments provider that also had a little bit of involvement in the pre-screening process. So when I asked them the question, when are you going to become compliant with GDPR? The response I got was, what's GDPR? Which we didn't go with them because it was global news at this time. There were already kind of indications that was going to become a U.S. requirement at the very least at state levels with CCPA and similar. So, I mean, I think now we're to a point where you don't see that type of conversation anymore. Like compliance is something that a lot of the more mature vendors and maybe some of the more prepared vendors kind of lead with, because again, it's helping to set the ground rules, which I really kind of see as a good thing, because then they can innovate after table stakes are satisfied. They can innovate on what they're actually doing.
Gotcha. Yeah, we've at REBA, we've certainly seen a market increase in the amount of focus that's being placed on compliance and security over the last couple of years. Whether it's technical vetting questionnaires, data processing addenda, contractual requirements to meet compliance framework standards like SOC 2 or ISO 27001. Almost every customer is rightly asking for Proptech companies to play their part when it comes to compliance and security. So I'm going to ask you to maybe take another question, Jason, with your many years in the industry. What current trends have caught your attention lately, and how do you think multifamily has evolved its approach to compliance and security over time?
I'm going to break that into two questions. So the evolution of the approach to compliance and security, I would say, is probably one where you're seeing a lot of standardized language that either needs to be on the agreements with vendors or that will come back in negotiations and redlining, which is data privacy riders, like you mentioned. That's something that, I started to see probably 5 years ago, and I don't think that anybody is doing business without, at the very least, black and white details of who's on the hook if the B word happens, breach, just to be clear. So that, I think, is, if you're not using data privacy riders when you're having these conversations, you should, especially if the vendor's agreements don't already kind of include language that at the very least covers the right party and indemnifies the right party. And then kind of on the trend side, I always feel, or I feel like there was always, a focus around the resident, but I feel like in the last probably 3 or 4 years, it's not just a focus. Like it is the point of gravity for everything that's happening. So I think that that's probably going to continue to be the trend, is that everything's going to be focused on the person that needs the house, right? The organism. And honestly, like, if you don't have your privacy, if you don't have your compliance game kind of already completely buttoned up and completely figured out before you start having conversations, you need to, because that absolutely will be a continuing trend, I believe.
Yeah. So Samantha, in your mission to drive innovation, what security or compliance protections are a necessity, regardless of how innovative the solution is, or what kind of impact it can make?
Yeah, a couple of things there. One, we always have a privacy addendum in the contract, right? There are laws that were passed just this year, I think in California, Colorado, Virginia. So we're always looking at the legal paperwork, because that's sort of where it starts, right? And then on the innovation side, we always make sure that we have redundancies in place for anything that we're rolling out, to make sure that there's always a backup in case this technology, and in case there's a fail point, we have another way to provide a solution, a service, or communication to our customer, our renter. And so those two things, I think, combined help us move forward and innovate. I would also echo what Jason said in his response earlier about looking for a partner that is willing to tell us no if we're asking questions or thinking about things in a way that might lead us down a road that may or may not be buttoned up from a compliance standpoint. We want them to be just as invested in this as we are. And so if a partner tells us no, and here's why we're concerned about that, that makes us like you more.
That's an excellent segue into our next section, Samantha.
Great.
So we have covered some of the basics for selecting the right Proptech solution, ensuring that it doesn't put your company at risk from a compliance or security perspective. So let's transition to a happier topic. Let's talk about the benefits of getting it all right and really hitting home run with your selection, not just of the technology, but of what vendor partner you'll be working with. Specifically, we're going to focus on the benefits of a true technology partnership. Jason, you've recently changed from a role where you evaluated solutions and implemented solutions to ones where you're helping others do that. Given that unique perspective, what's your take on what distinguishes a true partner from a vendor?
I distill it down to something very, very simple, and it's really just about listening. So if you're having these initial conversations and the prospective partner or vendor on the other side of the table isn't really kind of paying attention to what makes your business unique, especially if they haven't fully defined their target market first, then they're probably not a partner, or at the very least, they haven't figured out how to become a partner, right? So when you're having these conversations, if a prospective partner can be not only kind of very attentive to kind of the questions that you ask, but also how you describe your business to them in a way that they can easily say, well, here's how our product works for you. Here's how, here's where our product may have some gaps, but here's a roadmap for where we may align. Like that's what a conversation with a partner feels like versus, and I've experienced this, where someone will say, well, that's not how our product's intended to be used. That's another conversation stopper, right? So, that's really kind of what I boil it down to is just listening and, exhibiting that they're listening throughout the entirety of the relationship.
Got it. How important do you feel it is that potential technology partners know our industry? How important is it that they've got experience in multifamily versus just experience in technology?
That probably depends a little bit on the type of solution, right? So if it's a product or maybe even a service that is truly about helping to manage a business, and I'll give an example, pure play analytics products and services, right? Those can be applicable to just about any industry as long as either the partner or kind of the things that kind of bolt into what the partner provides can be translated very fluently into the industry. I'm probably one of the few that will say that, it doesn't have to be multifamily specific to work for multifamily. I'm not saying go out and buy, the biggest, best ERP and configure the hell out of it to make it work for your model. I'm definitely not an advocate of that. And I've seen a lot of disastrous attempts at that. But what I'm saying primarily is the industry is obviously the focal point, but the industry itself is evolving. And there are lots of, I'll say, nuanced segments of the industry that don't exactly kind of work the same way. They rhyme, right? But so flexibility, but familiarity is probably the right mix with a partner.
Got it. Samantha, what are some of the things that you look for in an ideal partner for Mill Creek?
An ideal partner for us. Personally, I really like to look for someone who has worked on site. You can tell in a sales demo if they've worked on site or not, because they really understand what implementing or even testing new tech does for the on-site teams. And they'll also dial in on the integration. You can tell that they'll understand, like, this integration really does impact an on-site associate's day to day. And that's why this is so important. I also really like it when a partner has their own customer service team. I want them to treat my on-site associates the way I treat my on-site associates, and if they have their own support system for the new technology, they need to ask questions. That's even better. And then I will dial in on the reporting. I'm doubling down here. We really, really need the reporting, right? Why test technology at all if you can't measure what you're testing? And so, yeah.
Yeah. So they've had to have baked Otis Spunkmeyer cookies at some point in their career if they want to work with you then.
I mean, I don't know that that's like a total requirement, but please don't come to a demo with me and tell me, oh, the best part about this solution is that your on-site teams don't have to do anything. That is
Right.
not true. And you have shown your cards, sir. That is not true. Because even if it's the most seamlessly integrated solution, our teams have to be trained on something new. It's going to change the process in some way. And they're going to have to explain this change to their residents, to their teammates. And then they'll have to, just as we, as the people that sit here in these offices, have to go and get buy-in and explain the why, they also are going to have to go and get buy-in and explain the why to the people that are in their atmosphere. And so, yeah, you have to at least have some empathy to what they're doing.
I think that's so important. And I think something that a lot of us who select and implement technology learn the hard way is that we've got to understand the impact to our site teams and to our support teams before anything that we implement is going to be successful. So it's awesome that you're focused on that. So let's talk bottom line. How can a true tech partner help clients achieve their business goals and ROI? Jason?
So I think we've covered all of the important components of that, where I think, the achievement of the business goals and the ROI should be the output of a kind of thoughtful and intentional selection process, right? So as long as the reporting that you require kind of aligns with the sales pitch initially. So what I'll say, and this touches on Samantha's point a little bit, is if the product comes in and it says, here are the things that we're going to make better, here are the ways we're going to reduce expenses or drive revenue. If you have a partner that is kind of authentic about the sales side of that, and they have the reporting to back it up after the fact, then you end up with the product that you intended to buy. So reporting is key, right? And it can't just be, we saw that quarter over quarter, your renewals increased, right? Or your leases increased, without kind of authenticity and honesty and integrity behind the reporting. So for example, and I know I'm giving a lot of examples, but for example, I've seen slide decks that say, quarter one over quarter two, we saw a 95% increase in leasing. I'm exaggerating. But without, asking the question or prodding the question of, well, what quarters were we talking about? And of course, it was, summer versus fall. And it was a seasonal and cyclical product type that we were talking about. So without the authenticity and the integrity behind both what you're sold and what you end up with, you're going to have problems. But the converse of that is, if that's the type of partner you're dealing with, you're really going to enjoy what you bought.
How do you see that, Samantha? What are some of those drivers of partnership in NOI or NOI, ROI, any of those good three-letter acronyms?
I think so. I love everything Jason said, and I just want to build on that, because I think what's important to remember, and the reason we're so focused on the impact for our site associates, is that whatever technology we're testing, it is only one element of a grander ecosystem, right? And so that element, that technology in a silo, in a test, is probably going to fail. But if we can support the technology with appropriate training for the on-site associates, appropriate marketing to market whatever tool we're solutioning, whether that's on the website, communications materials to our customers, our future residents or current residents, software support training for any tickets that come through or questions from the associates if the vendor doesn't have an external customer service team. I mean, at Mill Creek, we really like all those tickets to come to us so we can track and manage what's working and what isn't. But the technology in and of itself is just part of the ecosystem. And so we can get to a successful endpoint if we tweak multiple variables within that ecosystem. And I think that's that's really what's important to remember, and having a partner that is willing to work with us on that. When we say, here, we're seeing these results right now, 30 days or 60 days into the test. Here's the performance metrics. And we want to get to this number. Here's what we've changed on our end. We're gonna go back and retrain our teams. We're also going to implement a piece of collateral that gets put into a leasing packet for our future residents. Can you go back and work on this part of the integration? We think if our teams are getting this lead popped in this queue or whatever it is, then we think we're gonna get to this success metric over here that we've identified. And so being able to work together collaboratively, and that's why getting the why and the buy-in and the stakeholder analysis at the beginning is so important, is the key to success with any partner, I think.
Yeah, I love the term that you use there, ecosystem, because there's so much interdependency in the tech solutions that we all implement. That's just such an apt term for what we're all trying to implement into is that ecosystem. Well, I hope that you've all learned as much as I have from Samantha and Jason. As a recap, we've talked about the importance of evaluating every potential solution against your strategic plan, key factors to consider related to compliance and security, and the benefits of choosing a true Proptech partner. With that, we'll open the floor for questions. Feel free to ask your questions verbally or type them in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer. Checking that. Okay, we've got some Q&A here. Okay. So other than integrating with the PMS or no reporting, are there other deal breakers for you, Samantha, or Jason, as you advise your clients? What other deal breakers might there be besides no integration or no reporting?
Jason, go ahead.
So
I'll build off you.
Yeah, this may sound petty, so I'm putting that out there to begin with. But if I ask very straightforward qualifying questions on anything in the sales deck, and the answer is I don't know, and I mean, like, what quarters are those that you're comparing? If I get oh, I'm not sure, let me look at that, then that's almost like an invitation for me not to talk to that company again. Because especially if it's either the very first or, I mean, even worse, kind of a second round review of a pitch deck or a conversation, and you at the very least don't have enough kind of backup to what you're selling, I'm done. But that's, again, and maybe too exclusionary, especially just with the volume of pitches that occur in this space. But that's one for me.
I would say for me, for customer service, if you're not responsive to me or my on-site team quickly, like within 24 hours, I'm done. Especially my on-site team. If they call me and say, hey, I reached out to the appropriate person and they haven't gotten back to me, sorry about your luck.
Okay, we've got another one. This one is directed to me. So for me, what was your biggest eye-opening moment moving from the client to the partner side? Yeah, so I spent most of my career selecting and implementing technology, and now being on the other side, the vendor partner side. I would say the pace has been the biggest change for me. One of my coworkers said that we've got to move at tech speed. I know how busy and hectic the operations side is for property management companies, but I think the difference to me has been that you can somewhat control the pace if you're on the PMC side. If you're a partner, you better be able to meet the pace of your customers, or you're not going to be in business very long. So I think that's been the big thing for me, is that that we've really got to focus on the pace that our customers need, and not, we don't get to decide the pace. We've got to match the pace. So, to use the sports analogy, it's like, the folks who make the jump from college to the pros, and they talk about just how the game is so different just because of the pace. And sometimes I feel like a slow college player that's trying to keep up with the pros. Okay, here's another question. And this is a quick one. Can innovation backfire?
Yep.
That's so funny, because I was going to say no, as long as you're learning.
Well, I guess, it depends on what the stakes are for you, right? Like,
Oh, yeah, 100%.
if you go all in with some bleeding edge tech, and they, in some cases, go out of business, sometimes, depending upon how dependent you've become on that tech, that can be challenging. But then also, even if, so for example, there's some consolidation in Proptech we've started to see. If you buy a differentiated product, and when they get acquired or when they get subsumed into something larger, if kind of what you loved about them goes away, or maybe changes in a way that doesn't feel great anymore, that's not as severe of a backfire. But honestly, falling out of love with a solution happens in those situations, or it can happen in my experience.
Yeah, what an open and probably purposefully open-ended and vague question. But I think about like the whole realm of innovation. At one point, cutting your pizza in squares and not triangles was innovative, So is that, and how do you define backfire, really? To me, we are very thoughtful, and we don't take steps with a partner very quickly, So to me, the risk is a little bit lower as long as we've got all those foundational elements that we've discussed during this webinar in place. The backfire is relatively low risk, and hopefully you learn immensely from that and can use it in the next iteration of whatever you're testing.
Yeah, I'm going to add on to that a little bit. My first reaction would have been the same as Jason's, to say, yes, it can backfire. But I also think that there's a lot of wisdom to what you said as well, Samantha. I think, to me, what differentiates a learning experience from a backfire, because, any failed implementation or selection is a great learning experience. But I think the real backfire is if we've not approached it correctly, and kind of taken a lot of the tips that you guys have talked about today, and not insulated our site teams as well as we can. That, to me, is the real backfire, is when innovation negatively impacts our site teams, because they don't really have the time to be negatively affected. There can be little hiccups, but there can't be disasters. And then sometimes it can affect our residents, and that's almost as bad as affecting our teams. So to me, that's where it goes from learning experience to backfire, is if the magnitude it really starts affecting those stakeholders.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Samantha's answer now. Well, because if you have a screening criteria that's aligned with your risk tolerance, then by default you will learn and you'll be prepared for it. So, but yeah, it still hurts if it does go south.
It for sure hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. What are some great resources that you recommend for staying up to date with industry and technology trends?
I have a couple.
Yeah.
So I'm a podcast person. I love podcasts. So I listen to The Fork, which is a New York Times podcast. And I just started listening to Pivot, which is available on Spotify. And those I think are great because, when you're in this role, and I've only been in this role for 1 year, so these two gentlemen with so much more wisdom is saying, yes, they can totally backfire. And I'm, the new kid on the block going, fine. For me, I'm in the weeds all day. I'm making sure that we've got the collateral in place for this new test that we're rolling out and all of these things. And so when someone comes to me and says, hey, have you heard about Chat GPT, like 6 months ago or whatever, I was like, oh yeah, I did, because I heard it on the podcast. Yes, I heard about it. Let me make the time now to go try it out, but on a day-to-day basis, I'm not just like perusing the internet,
So my answer was going to be the same, except I was going to make reference to a podcast that I like that's called The Pitch. It's about startups. I've never heard of The Fork, but I think they should do something together. No, sorry. I'm sorry for that. But no, I am going to look into those too. But yeah, podcasts are definitely my way of staying up to date. When somebody told me about podcasts and kind of referring to them for industry trends like 5 years ago, I couldn't find much. You can find so much that is not only like specific to real estate, but specific to multifamily real estate. There's so much out there. So, finding a couple that you like that, are aligned with the segment of the industry that's most relevant to you, I think is probably one of the best ways to do it, unless you really like reading thousands of blogs.
Yeah. I mean, I would also say, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, Jason. I would also say, participating or signing up for webinars like these, or multifamily, what was a demo day that just happened a couple months ago? And even I think AIM has their own, demo day. I think those are really beneficial to sit and just learn what's out there. What are people thinking about? There's always a new Proptech provider in the space, and they all have some element of differentiation. And so I think attending those kinds of things are really important too.
Yeah, I think you guys both hit it. There's a ton of, general podcasts, and then there's a lot of great industry specific podcasts that are out there as well. And I think the underlying theme to me is that, I think I was worried when I started digging into some of these podcasts, they're just going to be failed sales pitches. But I really think, and certainly there's a few of them out there that are like that. But I think for the most part, this is a really giving industry. And I think, it's a tight knit industry. And I think everybody really more wants everybody else to succeed than looks at everybody else's competition. So I think number one, there's a ton of great industry specific podcasts out there. And I think they're really trying to make the industry better, even more so than, sell their product. And number two, there's so many great people in multifamily. If you're stuck on something, if you don't have experience on something, get on LinkedIn and find somebody, or reach out to a colleague and see who they know somebody. And I think people will be surprised at how willing, some of the really big names and veterans in our industry are so helpful and willing to share their knowledge with others. That's one of the things I love most about this industry. And I think it's a great and probably underused resource. All right, I'm looking to see if we've got any more questions. All right, I think we're at the end of our questions. So thanks to all of you for attending. Thanks to Samantha Chalmers and Jason Shaw for sharing their great knowledge, their tips and tricks, and their insights. We'll have a recording of this webinar that will be available to anybody who attended or registered. So if you need to go back and really dissect anything that Samantha or Jason said, you'll have the opportunity to do that. So thanks to you guys as panelists. Thanks to all of you for attending from the team at REBA. We will meet again soon.